My name is Molly Cerridwen, and I am a Yupik traditional healer. And today I would like to share with you some herbal syrup recipes. Different ways you can store up plants and flowers and all sorts of edible botanicals into a infusion or decoction base, and then mixing it with sugar to help store it for future use. So I'll go through the whole process, but first I would just like to take a moment where we can all just take 3 deep breaths together and settle into the place where we are, into where we came from, and to where we're going. And in this moment, I would just like to take the time to honor my mother and everything she's taught me and her ancestors from Tununic and the Kamchatka Peninsula, and then to honor my father and his ancestors from County Kerry, Ireland, and Nenana. So I invite you all to think of your own ancestors, where you came from, and what brought you here today. So thank you so much. We are all here in this virtual space making this decision to spend time together in community and learn and lunch and learn about different herbs. I've chosen 3 different plants to make into syrups for you today as a demonstration, and I have them in 3 different steps so that you can see every part of the process without having the video be hours and hours long. So the first thing we're going to do is our first step, which is take our raw plant material, and I'm going to use some fresh fireweed, which I'm representing in my hairdo today. I picked this fresh fireweed this morning, and I don't know if many of you know the story about being able to tell when the fall time is coming, but these are I'm here in Knik, and these are the fireweed full fronds now. So you can see it's very close to the top and only a couple little flowers left to bloom. So we are very close to our fall. And as soon as these last flowers bloom, and then once they fall down, then the first snow is soon behind. So I picked those to just show the whole of it. And then this is the basket that I've picked for us to make our syrup with. So I mainly picked the tops of the flowers, and I tried to leave as many of the seed pods that had already been forming on the plant so that this fall they will open and then help propagate more fireweed, which we really love to encourage in sustainable harvesting, the self-propagation of these plants that we use as food and medicine. So for that step, I have this clean glass jar. So as you can see, we've got some flowers and some of the seed pods with the stem. All of fireweed is edible, but the flowers tend to be sweeter. We're also adding a sugar to the syrup, so it's kind of a wash. You could use unsweet plants and actually make them sweet. So I'm going to put the whole thing and just tear off any extra stem that I have. So here, full heads of flowers. They look good. I love putting potential flowers in there because in herbal medicine, the act of having a flower that has yet to be opened, or a seed, also has the same energy where it's full of potential energy. So it will encourage our body systems to create, to grow, to be more energetic through this potential energy. So I add all of that in as well. So I'm just going to stuff this gallon. So I have this gallon jar, and when we're using dried herbs, it's anywhere from 2 to 4 cups. And then I cover with boiling water and then cover it with a with a lid. The process for fresh plants is a little bit different, and that is because fresh plants take up more volume, right? Dried, they kind of condense down and they're easier to handle in a measuring cup device. But with fresh plants, you kind of just look at them, appreciate them, they really like it, say thank you for all the medicine that you're going to provide. And the act of picking these plants provides medicine to our body. Being in nature, having a good heart spirit while we're gathering, puts us in a good mood, breathing fresh air. All of these aspects are a part of healing our bodies. So it's not just the act of making the syrup, it's the intention behind the syrup. So since we're going to use more than 2 to 3 cups of a dried material, we've got this fresh fireweed, I'm actually gonna pack the jar because I want this fireweed syrup to just be so amazing that this winter, when I crack it open and make something delicious with it, it'll be like that hint of summer and late fall magic. So that's another joy of preserving our summer goods, is that when we have the seasonal depression of being in the dark, we are able to open our shelves, our cupboards, and find these products that we've created and really bring a little bit of summer and sunshine back into our lives. That's one of my favorite medicines. So as I do this with anyone who has any questions, please type them in. Fireweed it's used in a lot of different applications in herbal medicine. In traditional Yupik medicine, it grows where fires and where trauma to the land has occurred. So energetically, it supports trauma response. And then physically, it's high in vitamin C. It's also a green, so it's got loads of chlorophyll, some vitamin D, and D helps synthesize the C. So kind of whatever sunlight is available in the winter and you're ingesting some fireweed that you've put up, you're actually able to absorb that sunshine and utilize it in a more productive way through the combination of those chemicals. Also, I picked fireweed because we've been doing a couple of these flower classes, and I wanted to do fireweed for some of those recipes, but they just weren't quite ready. So I waited until they were in full bloom when all of the medicine is in the flowers. So I think I've talked about this before, but in the way I was trained as an herbalist is to think of a plant as how it directs its energy. And wherever it's directing its energy, that's where the medicine is. That's where the most potent chemicals of the plant live. So when a plant is in the spring and it's growing new leaves, all of its energy is coming from the root into the new green life. So those new greens have the most medicines. So think fresh spring dandelion greens that we did in the first lesson, and fresh fireweed shoots that are, maybe this tall and look kind of like asparagus. That's that medicine right there in that shoot. As the plant matures, it grows bigger leaves, and then because it wants to propagate, it wants to essentially mate with other flowers to create more, then it grows these beautiful flowers, and that's all of its energy is put into the flower so that it can entice and smell wonderful for all of the pollinators that are going to visit these plants and cross-pollinate. So being in full bloom, that's the best medicine for making this particular syrup, because I wanted the potency of these beautiful fireweed blooms for our medicine. And when the fall time comes for our perennial plants, we actually, all the energy starts to drop back down into the roots. You can see it really well in trees. They lose their leaves. They're like, okay, we don't need those anymore. Let's consolidate energy. And then they kind of retreat into the innermost base of their trunk and down into their roots. So any root-bound plant would be harvested in fall once they stop caring about the reproduction cycle. So that's just, you know, like getting to know plants, getting to know kind of the how and why and the when for the different plants that you want to pick. Because certain plants can even be poisonous if picked at the wrong time, or if you pick the leaves versus the flowers. Like certain plants, only the flowers are edible. And it's just good to keep that in mind. So we are getting close to the top of the jar, but you know, then I have to press it down and you see just how little I have. So any other questions? I hope I answered that question in a concise way for you. Apologies if not. Another bonus with fireweed is it just makes me happy. I love how tall it grows. It grew where I grew up outside of Edina, Alaska. We would have fireweed that was taller than me. And I always loved walking through those fields. And although they don't smell very strong, they have this really light aroma that is calming. And I think that has to do with, you know, its resiliency in really rough places. And it's a tenacious plant. So all of those things get imbued in the medicine that we make. And before I finish stacking all these beautiful flowers in here, I'm just going to start my water to boil so I can cover it with boiling water. I have to remind myself that people, when they're learning, some flowers look the same. And so it's really important to really know what you're picking. Sometimes milk vetch, which is like kind of taking over, it's an invasive species. It has this, it's in the pea family, and it has this really pretty purple flower. But what it does is it chokes the plants. It will start spiraling up spruce trees. I've seen a spruce tree completely covered as if it was decorated for Christmas. And you know, what I did was tear down the milk vetch because it's using another plant to get closer to the sun. And then in the process, it kills the plant underneath. But I've also seen it wrapped around fireweed because it grows really tall. And some people, when I've taken them out on walks, they're like, oh, this is it too. I'm like, no, that's not it. That's a separate plant. It's just, it's parasitic. So it's choosing to wrap itself around this plant. So keeping that in mind, definitely. And of course, learning our local plants. So with a little bit extra in my basket, I think we're about ready. So I did about 3/4 full, about double what I would do if it was, because 2 to 3 cups would be maybe 1/4, a little less than half of a gallon, depending on how finely chopped the herbs are. So since we're doing whole herbs, I'm moving to 3/4 full. And then it's kind of been on the counter a little bit, which I have some syrup on here, and it's kind of warming it up. But what I really want to do, because this is glass and I don't want to shock the glass because it will shatter, what I do personally is I turn on my kitchen sink to warm, not hot, I let it warm up, and then I just wash the outside of the jar with the warm water so that when I pour boiling water in it, it doesn't expand so quickly that it cracks, which has happened to me, and it's no fun. So as that warms up, set this here, get my lid out and ready. I've got the lid that fits perfectly on. And the reason for the lid is so that it traps the volatile oil components into the beverage. So, and I'll talk about that in a moment once I rinse this. So the jar is warm enough, and so I'm going to cover with boiling water. And so we can talk about the volatile oil compounds because I feel like it's really important to talk about. People are using a lot of essential oils, and basically what essential oils are volatile oil compounds, VOCs. And they were in the news for a while because there are also VOCs in paint. So like the smell that you get from a freshly painted house is actually a different type of petroleum volatile oil compound. So because it's so strong, so when they make essential oils, they steam distill it. Like true essential oils are steam distilled. So that means they do a process like this, and then the act of the steam rising actually holds the oil itself, hence the lid. So I'm trapping all those oils that would evaporate into the air and usually create scent. And by trapping them, I get to reintroduce them into the product that I'm making. So, so it gets trapped at the top, and then the condensation allows it to drip back down into the product. So actually, most teas that you would drink, I mean, I'm not talking about the tea plant like black tea, green tea, or white tea. I'm talking about herbal teas that people just call tea. Those preferably would be covered with a cap so that you could also trap those volatile oil compounds. And that's a way that you can really safely use essential oils, because every plant has an essential oil. It's that scent of it, that oil compound that creates their perfume. And then you get the benefit without having to use some of the stronger products. And as essential oil becomes more popular, there's less ethical practices involved. So people aren't explaining the risks, like you can have really severe skin reactions. You're actually never supposed to put essential oil directly on the skin. You should always mix it with a carrier oil is what I mean. So some type of neutral oil, almond, sesame, avocado oil, jojoba, all these things you would mix with the essential oil and then apply it to the skin so that you don't get a skin reaction. But more than that, if you were to do that and then go into the sun, you could get severe burns. And I've seen cases where people have almost third-degree burns on their body from applying an orange oil on their skin and then going into the sun. So this is a way to have our essential oils in a really safe way. And we can do that with all of the plants that we're using and utilizing hot water to infuse. And this is called an infusion. So I'm actually going to bring it up to you because I'm going to add another thing of water. And you can see the bottom half has already been leaching its color. So now they're about a lavender color. And as we go up, you can see the ones that haven't been touched by the hot water are still beautiful and that deeper purple. But we will set this aside while the water boils. And then I want to show you the next thing I made. The next herbal syrup is spruce boughs. So let me move this over here. You can see. So with spruce boughs, I feel like it was really important for me to pick this one because it's really potent medicine in my culture. It's used not only internally, but it's used in sweat lodge. It's a cleansing plant. So people would dry it and burn it, much like sage, and cleanse spaces. So it's one of our most popular Alaska Native cleansing plants. So much so that during certain ceremonies, we would cut down huge boughs of spruce and then lay them over fires and get that smoke really going. And so, I mean, we're talking fresh cut boughs. So they have all that resin in there and they start snap, crackling, and popping and so much smoke. And then you would actually smudge yourself with that smoke to begin a ceremony. So a lot of people know about spruce tips. And of course, I love spruce tips. They're delicious. It's the time of the spruce's cycle where we can actually eat directly from the plant. So I can pick a spruce tip off the tree, chew it in my mouth. It's soft enough for me to actually chew, and then I can actually process the minerals and vitamins in it. Once they harden, they deepen their resin, and moose are able to eat them because they can chew. They have these amazing teeth and this amazing digestive system that just allows them to take the nutrients out of it. One of the main nutrients in spruce boughs is vitamin K, and it is also very high in vitamin C. So I'm just listing the two biggest ones. There are so many more constituents in it. And if you've ever heard of like spruce pitch, spruce tar, all of those things are used for healing as well because they're so potent in that cleansing, healing aspect. So my water just kicked off. I'm going to top off this fireweed while it's here and hot. And then I'm going to show you how to strain the spruce boughs. So this infusion, okay, so quick recap on our herbal lesson. And you can already see the color coming down into the fireweed. It's this beautiful light pink color, if you can't see it. Light pink, perfect. I'm gonna swirl it around a little bit, get all the plants covered. And this is called an infusion. So we've got infusions, tisanes, and decoctions, and I'll kind of do a quick recap on all of those. What we would make is an herbal tea where you steep for 5 minutes maybe, and then remove the packet. That's called a tisane, and that's where the word tea came from. When you take a plant and you cover it with boiling water, and then you let it sit overnight to cool, sometimes maybe a second night, but you can't really do it too long because it will start to mold or break down in some way. So I do it one night, about 24 hours. So tomorrow at 12:33, I'm going to strain out this product and start to make my herbal syrup. So now we show the straining part, and we've got spruce boughs here. And if you look closely, you can see there is this oily sheen on top of the spruce boughs, and they've changed color. The ones I've picked were very green, and now they've darkened as I've cooked them. And the reason why this is not in a glass jar is because I didn't make an infusion. I had to make a decoction with this, which is a third way to process with water. And so because the resin is so bound within the needle and it's so hard, you actually have to cover it with water and then boil it for a while and then reduce the boil so that it's on a sustained heat cycle for, some people do it an hour. I like to do it a little bit longer so that I get even more flavor, even more nutrients out of it. So it's now cooled off because I prepped it yesterday, and my setup here is a bowl that I repurposed with my pliers to have a little pour spout. And then I have a fine mesh strainer covered with a cheesecloth, because although I do want some of these oily compounds. I don't want all of it because it will get sticky in the jar. So I'm gonna pour, and as I'm pouring, let me know if there's questions. So I boiled it on high for about 20 minutes, then I reduced to a simmer and covered it, you know, of course, covering it to keep all those oil compounds dripping back down in. And then probably the low simmer was about 2 hours, just because I had the time and I could keep checking on it because I was prepping this syrup as well. So I'm gonna transfer this to my biggest pot because it's the biggest amount of syrup I'm gonna make, because in next week's recipe, no, not next week's, because next week is ferments, but then the class after that, I'm gonna make a salmon recipe, and I'm actually gonna use this spruce syrup in place of maple syrup for our marinade and glaze. So it's really yummy. I hope you get to join me, because then you'll get to see the finished product of the spruce syrup and how it adds to a savory dish. Because syrups, even though they're sweet, they don't have to be used just as a sweet tool. Sugar is often used to enhance the salt of things, so you don't need to add as much salt if you add a touch of sugar. So next round, and then I'll just plop all these in. Yeah. And so I press it just to make sure everything is out. Oops. And yes, spilling happens. The thing I love and hate about herb work is the wonderful messes that we make. So it's embracing lots of wet counters and little tiny pieces of plants everywhere. So I dumped the spruce that I filtered, and I'm going to add it all into my largest cook pan. So it's not super dark. It might be a little lighter than you're used to, but as it cooks down in the syrup, it will darken. So it's going to look totally different once we make it into a syrup. So this I'm going to set aside with the lid because, oh, actually, we'll complete this process. I was going ahead of myself. So now we've strained the product. This is our spruce bough syrup, and it is, let's see, we've got about just under a gallon. Perfect. So the recipe I wrote called for 4 to 8 cups of sugar per gallon of liquid, of infusion. So I have here just 4 cups, and you can see that's a lot of sugar. Like, this is 4 cups of sugar. It's not a small amount, and I like to use the smallest amount available. So I prefer my syrups to be a little more like a maple syrup, where it's a little more viscous and less like thick. Certain syrups get really, really thick. And really that depends on a couple things: how much sugar you're putting in and how long you cook it down. So I'm going to add that sugar now. And another thing about the sugar is it helps preserve the plant, and it helps preserve the liquid itself. So these herbal syrup recipes that I'm giving you, I'm doing as single herbs because for ease. What I do at home is I often make blends of different types of plants so that we get, you know, different minerals and vitamins in one substrate, in one syrup recipe, and that can get complicated. So I just wanted to stick with the one. So once we, because I like a lower sugar, that means that I tend to cook it down a little more, and it also means that it doesn't last as long on the shelf. So if you want to prepare these syrups to last for, you know, years into the future, go on the higher end of the sugar scale, you know, maybe go to 8 cups and still reduce it down, get it really thick, and then making sure your bottles are sterilized. Your syrup could last for years in a dark, cool place. But my syrups never last that long. I give them away. I use them in my cooking. So really, that's another reason why I prefer the lower sugar option. And then it kind of just like enhances the flavor of the plant as opposed to overpowering it and just being sweet on its own. So I've added that sugar, and now I will move it onto my stove onto a high heat until it boils. You can use honey. Honey also provides more liquid because it's viscous, and I do love honey. And if you've ever bought like bulk honey and then noticed it crystallize because it had been exposed to air and then the liquid kind of evaporated, that's actually the best stuff to make. And actually, I'll show you what I'll probably do. I was gifted this jar of honey, and as you can see, it's like very crystallized. This is what I use for my next batch of syrup, if I was going to use a honey. Now, the reason I use sugar in these recipes is because the intention behind them is as a food stuff, right? We're using it to store food as, you know, a way to provide sustenance later in the season once it gets cold. Now, how I got to this recipe was through my herbalist teacher, Deborah McCorkle. May she rest in peace. She taught me medicinal herbal syrups, meaning taking plants that usually don't taste very good because they're very potent in medicine, like osha root. Echinacea actually tastes good, but osha root, astragalus, you know, rhodiola, valerian root really doesn't taste very good, but they're all really potent medicine. And when kids are sick, the easiest way to get them to ingest medicine is with a spoonful of sugar or in a syrup form. So you can actually make medicinal syrups using all of these helpful antiviral, antibacterial herbs. You could even put garlic in there. I've done ginger. Gosh, it's like as far as your mind can go and imagine the plants that help you when you're feeling ill, you can actually make that into a syrup. And when you're doing that, you would add the 8 cups of sugar or the 8 cups of honey, and honey is preferred in these herbal syrups for medicine because honey is also a natural antiviral and it coats the throat so that often when we have respiratory distress, we cough and the throat gets raw. So by coating the throat, it's also having the herbs suspended in it, coats the herbs and then allows it to work its magic even deeper. And yarrow can definitely be made into a syrup. The flowers are very potent. You might not need to use as much as what I use in the fireweed, but yeah, yarrow is really good for lung health and actually cleaning out the lungs. So yes, if you blended yarrow with other chest supporting herbs, like a little bit of garlic, maybe some golden seal, you could do onion or fresh chives that you find out in nature. There's also the possibility of adding like peppercorns. If anyone's ever had a grandpa who cured you with a shot of whiskey with a bunch of pepper in it, my grandpa did. And you just take it back and yeah, it'll put kids to sleep, but you know, maybe whiskey's not the way to do it. And another way would be this syrup. So once you bottle it, you can take it out in the winter and then use it in smaller amounts for yourself and your family to help reduce the symptoms and the duration of the illness. So it's something I've used successfully for years, and I definitely rely on it. And I love making new blends and finding out the herbs that work the best with each other. Oh, another one with yarrow, because yarrow, if you look at yarrow, it looks like how the lungs look when they dissect them. There's like all these alveoli that absorb the oxygen. And so it's representative of the lungs. So another lung plant would be sage. So garden sage, the big leafy green variety that you would cook with, that would also go very well in a yarrow medicinal syrup. So I hope that helped. And so we're bringing this, it's gonna come a rolling boil. I'm gonna get my other big spoon out, stir in, make sure all of the sugar is melted into the liquid. And then we wait. So it takes a little bit because we're coming from room temperature and it's a large amount, and we're gonna bring it to a boil. So that's gonna take a long time. And then once it's at a boil, you will reduce it to medium to low heat so that it's at a simmer, and it will bubble pretty frequently, but no popping bubbles. We don't wanna get it so hot that they're exploding bubbles, because that will really hurt you and it will make a huge mess around your space. So while this heats up, our spruce syrup, I'm gonna grab our rose. So this is all the rose. I used the rest of my rose petals for this. So we're gonna wait for this to boil. I've got this beautiful thick rose petal syrup, and it started at about 3.5 liters, a little over. And now we're just under 2 liters. So we have reduced it down by half, and that's what we want. It's still a little warm because I finished it this morning. It takes a long, so once it gets to boil and then you're simmering it for 3 hours at least, stirring it every 20 minutes. And we have it in large pots so that when you stir it, often it will foam up and then reduce down. So this is the finished product. And I'm actually going to get it even hotter so that I can bottle it. Because the act of bottling it, we need it hot. We want it as hot as possible when we bottle it, because the heat will contract and then seal the jar. So right here, I have 6 jars, and they've all been sterilized so that they don't get shocked. I have, once I cleanse them, I'm going to also turn on my hot water and rinse all of the bottles with hot water so that they don't get shocked and break. So I'm gonna do that while the rose syrup boils. And then, this is my little ladle. It's just a small saucepan. And then I have a plate to protect my table from getting really, really syrupy. Perfect. We have everything set up except the funnel. And I like to use these smaller funnels for these with a handle. The handle makes life so much easier.
So sugar we've used for a very long time in food preservation because it helps to inhibit microbial activity. And so it basically crowds out the moisture, it crowds out the microbes that can grow, that can cause mold and spoilage. So that's why like jams are really popular, right? These herbal syrups are really popular. And it's why Molly gave some options of different levels of sugar you can use. So if you're going for that less sugar side of things, it might not be enough to safely preserve it for countertop preservation, right? Countertop storage. And so you do want to use the full sugar amount if you are going to be storing it, say, in a pantry or in a cellar, or something longer than the season.
So now that this spruce syrup is at a rolling boil, I stir it and you can see that the foam bubbles up. And I'm just gonna turn it down to just between low and medium. And I'm gonna let it do its thing. And this is a great activity to do on a cold day because it's gonna heat up your house, but it's also gonna make aromatherapy and it's going to smell so good. If you have a problem with like condensation or humidity in your house, then what I suggest is turning on your venting fan. But our rose syrup is absolutely ready. It's got beautiful bubbles on top. It's nice and hot. I'm gonna pull it off the burner. And then I'm going to move this to here so that we have access to our beautiful rose syrup. Turn that off, turn this down. And you can see the rose. Can everyone see this? All the beautiful high bubbles on that. That is ready to be bottled. So I'm gonna grab my small saucepan, dip it in. Because the act of resting the funnel down, it actually creates a vacuum. So you want to lift the funnel up, which is where the handle comes in. So that air can pass through the gap from the base of the funnel to the lid, the opening of the jar. And then you might spill some, but that's okay. And you want to fill it. I like to fill it because I'm using heat to can it. I am going to fill it pretty darn full. And I like to do about where these metal prongs insert into. And when you have a place that you've designated as the primary spot, like our, it is very hot. So make sure you have, so right about here, where the prongs meet, the metal prongs, that's where I like to put the syrup because everything is expanded right now in its heat. So we can actually watch it suction down and consolidate by noticing where we put it first, and then it will actually shrink down and look like a smaller amount and go to the amount that it's, you know, kind of more commonly bottled at. So because I got syrup on the lip, I'm actually taking isopropyl alcohol and a clean paper towel to get all of that syrup off. So we have a nice clean seal, and I'm also cleaning this seal. So immediately capping it and locking it. Yep, there it goes. So a little more alcohol spray, because alcohol really cuts the sugar nicely. And this is the beautiful rose syrup. And you can see here, let me bring my light behind it, the color. That's my favorite part. And it's so fun to make. And the smell last night of having rose just simmering on my counter for 4 hours was pretty phenomenal. So I'm gonna wait to bottle the rest because I have a surprise. The recipe is these herbal syrups, but the treat for the day is I set aside some of this rose syrup, and I'm gonna make just a quick little herbal soda that I make for my friends and family. I make lactation blends. So I have a couple of people in my life that I've worked as a doula for, and often women have trouble with lactation. So we can make herbal blends based on lactation. So the raspberry leaves, the nettle, you know, so many herbs support women's health. So what I found in my garden is some beautiful mint. I'm just going to place some mint in there on the side of the jar. We've got these beautiful fireweed blooms. strip the seeds and put that in there. So yeah, there's the mint. It's we got a couple different varieties, spearmint and peppermint. But I picked a peppermint leaf because it's just so pretty. And then what I've discovered is by pouring in the soda water first, we reduce the fizz, because if you put the soda or if you put the syrup at the bottom and then stir it up, it kind of foams really, really high and it's hard to make a whole drink. So I just prepped in my soda stream. You can use canned. And then I'm going to use only 2, just like Leslie said, only 2 tablespoons of this herbal syrup. So 1, 2. Wipe it off, mess cook, and then I'll stir it up with a straw. And you can see the beautiful color from that. So I'm gonna enjoy, so we can have our fancy vacation beverages here in Alaska, and they're way more delicious than some of the tropical ones. That is my class on herbal syrups. And I know we went a little bit over, but I'm really happy to have shared the whole process with you. And thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate you coming, and I'm excited to see you again next time.